and let it fall by its own dead weight.
And indeed, for weeks, it got no attention at all.
No attention whatsoever. And I think that's a big mistake. These are issues, these are deep issues. They have to do with consultation with the population, they have to do with land rights, they have to do with very fundamental rights. The government has to pay attention to this issue. I was told by a source very close to the Council of Ministers that a decision was made in the Council of Ministers to ignore the strike and let it fall by its own dead weight.
And indeed, for weeks, it got no attention at all.
Got no attention whatsoever. And I think that's a big mistake. These are issues, these are deep issues. They have to do with consultation with the population, they have to do with land rights, they have to do with very fundamental rights. The Defensoría del Pueblo here in Peru, the Ombudsman, has come out today with a pronouncement calling on the central government to assume responsibility in this case, calling on Congress and the two commissions in Congress which have already reviewed these decrees and said that they were unconstitutional.
Because of the lack of consultation.
Because of the lack of consultation. Calling on the different organs of government to assume their responsibility and deal with these issues. That's the Ombudsman office, and I think that has to happen. Congress has to come. Congress was the one that saved the day last year. Congress came out and said, well, yes, we agree with you. We're going to eliminate these two decrees which are causing so much problem. The government never said. In fact, the government's position was, that is the executive position always was, well, we don't understand why they want to do this. This is in their benefit, and they're just cutting off their nose to spite their face. And so they never could come around and admit, well, yeah, there's a problem here.
One of the terms that's always bandied about is sustainable development. There's sustainable development in the Amazon. Is the current emphasis on extractive industry, oil and gas production, forestry, which is supposedly renewable, the use those kinds of resources, are we headed for a sustainable model of development in the Amazon, or are we going the wrong direction with the way development is being carried out in the Amazon?
Well, I'll preface that with saying once again, I'm not against oil production because I have a car and I eat gas. And I realize that we're dependent on gas. But oil production is not sustainable. It's a non-renewable resource. You know, we suck it out of the earth, we burn it up, and that's the end of it. And if you, depending on how you use the income from that boom, a boom may last 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, your oil production boom, perhaps you can build a more sustainable economy, a more sustainable way of life in your country. I don't see that happening here. If we talk about environmental sustainability, we need to look at the forestry issues in the Amazon. There was an attempt to establish a concession system that was based on long-term management of the forest. It has been a tremendous failure, unfortunately. Part of the failure has to do with lack of government supervision and control over the system. And part of it has to do with market issues. 2 or 3 species that have very high value are what makes the timber industry profitable. And so regardless of these concessions, the timber industry has gone illegally after those 2 or 3 species and has practically mined those species completely out of the Peruvian Amazon. That's not sustainable. That's not a sustainable way to go about it. I think we have a lot to learn from indigenous peoples about sustainability. These are societies that have lived for 5,000, 8,000 years in the Amazon and have not destroyed it in that time. It's a small is beautiful view of things. These are small societies. They're not big consumer societies. But I think we still have, there are principles of their life and of their relationship with the environment that we can learn a lot from in terms of sustainability.
There was a time when Camisea was coming online when I mentioned to actually it was a bishop. The bishops in Peru the bishops in the Amazon, the Catholic bishops in the Amazon have come out strongly in support of the protest and the repeal of these laws. But I remember 6 years ago when I spoke to a bishop who's not one of the ones who is now working in the Amazon, and asked him about the impact of Camisea on the communities around. And he accused me of wanting to keep the indigenous people in the Stone Age. And I said, no, that's not what I wanted, but I thought they should be allowed to develop according to their own criteria and on their own time. And I've heard the same thing from indigenous leaders in recent days. They look at what happened on the Corrientes River and say, people talk about this as development. That's not the kind of development we want. I've also heard some people in government and in other circles say it's so difficult to get services to these people who live in distant areas, and I've heard them say it about the Amazon and also about the Andes, that it would actually be better if people just moved into cities where we can provide services. Yeah. What kind of development is appropriate? What is it? What kind of development are the communities that you've been working with, for example, seeking? What is the concept of development that they have?
Well, there's a lot of contradictions in that. I think most people in most communities who have now seen television, have now driven bikes, have seen boats with motors and so forth, want those kinds of things. Maybe not the same scale that we in urban areas want them and buy them and consume them, but they do want a number of those things. And that puts pressure on the resources around their communities, because they're in the same market game. Well, what has good price on the market? Well, this, animal skins. Okay, well, let's get animal skins and sell them. Well, that's not only illegal, but the animals are gone before very long. So there are now, with the pressure from the market and their need for cash, there are problems in communities about sustainability. There's a lot of attempts right now to develop managed forests with communities and to introduce plants like camu camu that are sort of natural to the area. They can be harvested in a sustainable way. And yet, if we look at overlay community boundaries in the Amazon over satellite images, we'll see that natural protected areas, parks, together with communities, are the two areas where we still find major areas of forest. So forest is being conserved in community areas. So again, I think there's a lot to learn there, and we need to learn it now, while we still have forest in the Amazon.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Richard Smith, and we'll be following the events in the Amazon in these coming days to see how this issue plays out. I'm Barbara Fraser for the Peruvian Times.